One phone call from a friend, cost of friendship. One canceled flight from another earned a personal thank you letter from airline management. Same system, same buddy pass. One guest passed the test, and the other failed it. Two people I'd known for years, and two completely opposite outcomes. Welcome back to Standby Secrets. I'm Frank Hardy, and today we're breaking down the buddy pass test every retiree's guest has to pass, what it actually is, what a host is responsible for before they ever hand over a pass, and two real stories of mine where that test played out about as differently as it possibly could. Here's the guest test, in one sentence. From the moment your rider reaches the counter until they walk out of the airport at their destination, they're not just traveling, they're representing you. And here's the part most people don't realize. That evaluation is already running, whether the rider knows it or not. Politeness alone won't earn you anything special. Being pleasant is just the baseline, the price of admission. But the system absolutely notices when you fall below it. Rude, entitled, demanding, that gets flagged, remembered, and held against you. What actually separates a good outcome from a great one is something else. Do you make the agent's day easier or harder? And here's what a lot of people don't realize. It's not just the rider's privileges on the line. It's yours as the host, too. Official airline policy is explicit. The retiree is responsible for making sure everyone traveling on their pass conducts themselves respectfully. Misuse doesn't just risk suspension for the rider. It can mean suspension of the host's own travel privileges, permanent revocation, and in serious cases, disciplinary action, up to termination if the host is still employed. So when you hand someone a buddy pass, you're not just being generous. You're putting your own privileges, and depending how bad it gets, potentially your career on the line for someone else's behavior. Get that right, and doors open that you didn't even know existed. Get it wrong, and it can be a really bad day for everyone. Before I hand anyone a buddy pass, we sit down. Not for 5 minutes. This briefing happens over days, sometimes the whole week before they fly. Here's the short version. First, these aren't my rules. They're straight out of American's own handbook. I'm just the messenger, and the one on the hook if you don't follow them. You can be denied boarding. You can be suspended from future travel, and so can I. This pass is for personal leisure travel only. No business, no side hustles. House hunting on your trip? Fine. Collecting rent while you're there? Not fine. You can't sell it, swap it, trade it, or give it away. You tell the truth to every agent, every time. And you're respectful. And here's the part people miss. Respect is judged by what the employee thinks, not by what you think you did. On listing, I'll put you on the PNR, you check in, as early as 24 hours out, and earlier is always better. Bring hard copies of everything. E-documents get you nowhere at some counters. And you don't call the airport, you don't call reservations asking how full the flight is, you don't walk up to an agent fishing for details. Silence is the strategy. On dress, American doesn't hand you a strict code, but I do. Think smart casual, minimum. Sport coat and tie for the men, a dress and modest heels for the ladies, if you want my honest opinion. Ask yourself one question. Do I blend in or look a notch better dressed than the people around me? If yes, you're set. And remember, community standards means both the communities where you are and where you're going. On the gate, international means 90 minutes before departure. And that's not 90 minutes before you start walking towards security. That's bags checked, security cleared, immigration cleared, standing at the gate. I tell people to give themselves 2 hours if they want any shot at a good seat. Don't ask other passengers to move. Stay clear of the podium so agents can work the paying customers. Once you're seated, that's your seat. don't ask for another. And if they need it back once you're already on the plane, you say nothing. You move. If you're not on the list 40 minutes out, you might get left behind, no matter what priority you're flying on. Somebody with more seniority than you may already be locked in, using a system you'll never see. That's not an insult. That's just how the list works. Keep quiet and let it work. On kids, my honest advice to most friends is, don't. If you're traveling with grandchildren, dress them the way you dress yourself and understand you're responsible for every bit of their behavior because that's a spot agents watch closely. But here's the real math problem. A grandchild isn't free. They're a second pass. Now you've got 2 seats needing to clear instead of 1, and the odds against you just doubled. And if that child is under 2, this isn't even a discussion. A child that young simply cannot fly on a pass. Full stop. No exceptions. So, unless you know exactly what you're doing, and most people don't, my advice is simple. Leave them home this time. Or wait until they're old enough to fly as an unaccompanied minor on their own ticket. It's just cleaner for everyone. Last thing, pack light. 1 bag, 1 laptop case, under 18 pounds. And if the flight attendant offers you a meal, you don't take it. You let her know quietly you're a non-rev, and you'll take whatever's left, if there's anything left at all. Follow all of that, and you'll fly like nobody ever notices you. That's the whole goal. But just make sure you get your host's briefing. I met him and his wife years ago through a mutual friend, a big, gregarious guy, easy to like. As a thank you for a kindness he'd shown my wife and I, we offered him a buddy pass, no strings attached. Here's my mistake. I handed him a business class pass and never walked him through how standby actually works. He showed up late, barely 45 minutes before an international flight with bags to check, because some part of him assumed business class meant the standby buddy pass rules and the clock didn't apply to him. When he arrived at the check-in counter, expecting to be treated like a business passenger, the agent asked him to step aside and wait until she'd finished with paying premium passengers. Non-revs get helped in those lines too, just after revenue, or when the line's empty. By the time he got to the gate, boarding was already underway. Every upgrade seat was gone. If he'd shown up early enough with real time to clear standby before boarding, he'd have very likely walked right into a business, maybe even a flagship class seat. He didn't take it well. Got loud. It got worse at the gate when only economy remained. Even the extra legroom seats were gone. The airline suspended his pass privileges for a year. But when I talked to him afterward, he didn't apologize. He repeatedly tried to justify it. That was the real surprise, a side of him I'd never seen. I couldn't risk vouching for someone who didn't take what happened seriously. We haven't spoken since. Not everyone fails this test. In fact, most people don't, but you'll rarely hear about it, because doing it right doesn't make for a dramatic story. There's no scene at the counter, no suspension, nothing to gossip about later. It just quietly works, flight after flight, year after year, until an agent recognizes your name before you even reach the podium. That's the version of this test most guests actually pass. But every once in a while, someone doesn't just pass it, they go so far beyond it that the airline itself takes notice. This is what that looks like. Retired U.S. citizens, originally from South and Central America. They became friends of ours years ago through overlapping interests. It turned out we had more in common than either of us expected. His wife is a lot like mine. Warm, outgoing, the kind of person who'll set aside her own convenience to help a stranger. She was traveling alone on a buddy pass, flying home after visiting relatives in South America when her flight had a mechanical issue. After a long delay, it was canceled outright. She had no special knowledge, no airline badge, no insider status, but she had a calm, reassuring presence, answering basic questions for worried passengers around her, translating between English and Spanish, just being a steady voice in a chaotic gate area. She wasn't an employee of our airline. She never worked for any airline. But plenty of people assumed she was because of the way she carried herself. When the flight was formally canceled, it turned into a scramble. A couple hundred frustrated passengers needing hotels, rebooking, answers. One family was especially distressed, refusing the hotel the airline offered. My friend stepped forward and offered to host them at her own home instead. The airline didn't just wave that through. Station staff knew she was a frequent buddy pass traveler with a local address, a family of her own nearby, and a retired company pilot host. They confirmed her identity, took down her information, gave everyone a special number to check on the status of the future flight, and then signed off on the arrangement. My friend and her family put the stranded family up for well over a day. Meals, entertainment, activities for the kids, company for the grandmother, the works. Eventually, she drove them all back to the airport when their new flight was arranged and stayed behind another day because there was still a shortage of available seats. Word of what she'd done worked its way up through the airline, culminating in a thank you letter from airline management. Years later, the agents in that city still remember her. If there's a seat up front when she flies, she and her husband get it. Full stop. So what actually separates these two outcomes? 3 things, and none of them are complicated. First, brief your rider before you hand over the pass. Standby order, dress code, how boarding priority actually works. Don't assume they know. Assume they don't. Second, ensure they never claim status they do not have. One friend acted as though he were a business class traveler. The other never said she worked for the airline. He was bravado, and people stood clear. She carried herself like someone worth trusting. Both are a choice, neither a title. Third, use your own resources instead of demanding the airlines. She put up a stranded family in her own home. She didn't ask the airline to solve her problem. She solved a problem for the airline. And one more from my big, gregarious, easy-to-like friend story specifically. 45 minutes isn't cutting it close for an international flight with bags. It's arriving after the game's already decided. Get these right, and you're not just a guest. You're the reason someone gets a buddy pass next time instead of a decline. If this kind of insider knowledge is what you've been looking for, subscribe and hit the bell. Every episode on this channel is built for non-rev travelers navigating the standby system, retirees, and everyone flying with them. Drop a comment and tell me your best or worst pass ride story. Next time, how to fly standby without letting a bad day ruin the trip. What to do when you're bumped at an outstation. How splitting up across cabins or even across separate flights entirely can actually work in your family's favor. And the mistakes that turn a good trip into a bad one. I'll see you in the next video.